everybody. Welcome to Off Panel, a weekly interview podcast about all things comics brought to you by Sketch.com. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week's guest is the artist of comics like Know Your Station and True Cult, as well as one of the busiest people in comics in general. It's Liana Kangas. Thanks for coming on, Liana.
Hey, thank you for my new title, busiest person in comics. I would say it's after at least James and or Elsa or somebody, you know. But being in that tier is great.
I actually named, I did my Sketched Awards, and I named Chip Zdarsky the busiest person in comics.
Oh, yeah, fair.
And then he wrote about it in his Substack, and then Mark Waid commented on the post, and it was like, I thought I was the busiest person in comics. And I'm like, am I starting like some sort of...
Oh, Mark, yeah.
Yeah, like, what about Jeff Lemire? Come on, guys. There's a lot of really busy people.
We're all going to become villains of each other in the fight to be the busiest person. Chip has already said that I am on his shit list now. So, you know, we are technically villains of each other. I think he said 1 year on my birthday.
What did you do?
Oh, nothing but be great. And I would say perhaps he is threatened by it, though I like the idea of that he thinks that he still has to defeat me in some sort of way.
Chip does fear greatness. That is, from what I understand, his greatest fear, to be honest. And bats, weirdly enough. I don't know. It's confusing.
I didn't know about the bats. But
no, I just made that up. I made both of them up, to be honest. But anyways, how's the new year treating you so far? Is 2 days in? Are things starting strong?
2 days in, yes, it's my first ever day off in terms of having New Year's and also the second day after New Year's off ever, because I've scheduled some great boundaries for myself, and I get to hang out with you today. It's great. This was my only plan.
Is that a resolution, or is that just kind of a life goal?
It's a resolution, and I would say like better work-life balance is a life goal right now. So...
You know, I kind of get that because, I mean, we're going to talk about Know Your Station, your new book over at Boom, and True Cult, your recently wrapped book over at IDW that has went through several permutations. But you have been doing a lot. You had a tweet not that long ago where you broke down your year. It was one of those, like, orgies of rectangles where it's just loaded up with all kinds of things. And it included 36 covers, 163 pages of interiors, a show poster, 8 character designs, and a ton of travel. Well, the graphic didn't include a ton of travel. I added a ton of travel.
I'm glad you did, because a lot of people don't know what that takes, you know?
Well, I mean, how are you drawing a comic while you're sitting at a con table? You're not. That's the answer. But how was the year? Did it feel as crazy as those stats suggest?
Absolutely. I think it was as chaotic as looking at that photo. It's like I didn't realize that when my assistant made the graphic, I was like, this looks like looking at a Magic Eye poster. It hurts my eyes a little. But it's also really cool to reflect back and be like, oh, I made all of that while somehow doing 7 conventions. And another, you know, like I did my first ever big Europe trip last year and a whole bunch of other stuff. So I'm very proud of myself.
Yeah, you should be.
You know?
I was trying to think of it. 36 covers isn't quite one a week, but it's pretty close to one a week.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a lot of breaks in there. Like when you're not doing a cover, you're probably doing, you know, interiors. When you're not doing interiors, you're probably planning what the characters in the world of Know Your Station are going to look like. When you're not doing that, you're promoting something. You're doing all these things. That's the thing that I think people kind of forget about when it comes to comics is the work itself is not all of the work. A lot of the work, especially for somebody like you, is just all the stuff that kind of comes with it, where you're constantly pushing to keep the next project coming or keep trying to build and build and build. It kind of never stops.
Absolutely. I think being your own manager, you know, being your own boss and also promoting your work and reaching out and finding avenues of like, you know, multiple income streams or like maintaining your community and then maintaining your social media, which is how you're trying to get the word out about your work and, you know, to buy your books or, you know, to read your work or anything. And also maintaining your collaborative relationships and your teamwork or like your relationships with your editor or, you know, managing IP projects or like anything like that. It's there, I guess, like a mountain of, you know, like desk work aside from just drawing, which sometimes gets a little, I think for me, one of the reasons why I was like, oh, I need to have a better work-life balance is because like I need that regenerative like time off
Yeah.
because I can tell that I will get burnt out very easily doing all this stuff because I'll look at a cover that I do, and most editors would say better finished than not turned in at all, right? But sometimes I'm like, it's not quite what I want,
Yeah.
but like there has to be a line where I draw where I'm like, okay, this is finished and turn it in. So, and that also comes into play like my higher understanding of where my skill set is at versus like my output. So, um, all of that with everything else included.
And the regenerative stuff too is just like that's how you continue to get better to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
I mean that's one of the tricky things is like part of getting better as a creator in all capacities is continuing to put in the work, but some of it also is you need time to like kind of rebuild your stock of energy and your inspiration and everything like that. And if you don't have time for that, if you don't have, these 2 days off, which I hope you have other days off on occasion, if you don't have those days off, you're not going to kind of be able to rebuild all of that energy you need to be able to keep pushing yourself forward and grow as an artist.
Absolutely. And one thing, a friend of mine, Fabian Lillet, has been yelling at me all year to like draw things for myself.
Oh, yeah.
Because when you draw all that stuff, and even though it might be an IP or a license that I love or something like that, it's still not like just picking up your pencil and doodling something for yourself,
Yeah.
And so, even though the thing you love has turned into a job, there are certain things where I think I was only able to a couple times this year draw something for myself. And one was like a portrait of Wednesday after watching the new series. And I was like, oh, I should do this more. This is really fun,
Yeah, yeah. Are you aware of the cartoonist Faith Erin Hicks?
Yes.
I love
Yes.
Faith. Faith is incredible. But one of the things I love about Faith is that despite the fact that she's done like 21 graphic novels in like 22 years or whatever it is, she also will take time to do fan art of like video games she played, or she'll do like, she did two of my favorite comics in the last year were these random like Twitter and Instagram comics she did that were her reacting to the world's troubles and everything that was going on and her realizing that she was a comic artist and that's what like that's her stock. Like, how does she help the world? And like, it just feels her emotional state is reflected in that. And it's amazing. And also her kind of relationship she did a piece on her relationship to Twitter as it was kind of disintegrating like a month and a half ago and it's somehow still alive. It was really good. They're both really good. But the thing is like they're pure manifestations of her. And, you can't draw a direct line from that to her graphic novels and say, this is how she got better.
Yeah.
But I feel like it helps.
I agree. That made me think of, I think it's Kate Beaton who does the, one of my favorite comics that seemed like just like such a fun for the hell of it comic, which is the auto bio of her running into the Kensington Market Spider-Man on a skateboard. And
what?
like,
how have I never read this?
Because they're just like quick little doodles, I think. I'm pretty sure it was Kate Beaton. Please correct me, anyone, if I'm wrong, but it's by far, I think, one of my top ever like strips that I've ever seen in my life. And it's only because it's the if you know, quote unquote. And I got lucky in that I think I saw him once ever.
Oh my God.
In all the time in my like whatever 2 years living there, but it's like a magical thing, and so that has like a special place in my heart.
That's incredible. I am envious because I love Kate Beaton and I've never seen this one, and everything about that sounds amazing. But tying into all of this, you have 2 days off. That means you've managed to put yourself in a position. You finished a deadline on Friday. You're in good shape. I know this is probably going to be really difficult for you to answer because you're constantly changing hats and doing different things, but what's an average work day for you like? When you start on a day where you need to get something done, like what's your approach?
My approach is I've started like a routine, which I didn't realize was a routine until I kind of looked back at my calendar and was like, oh, okay. I try to like bike 3 times a week and get up at least marginally by like 7. I'm not what I would consider a morning person, but I'm trying to become one because I think that I'm more productive in the morning. And I I would say my workday could be anywhere between like 8 to 12 hours.
Yeah.
But it's like split up over certain times. So like I get a lot of social media and like emails done in the morning, and then I try to draw, or sometimes I have meetings sprinkled in between. And then I do like a lot of my cover work is sometimes like Monday, Tuesday, and then my pages are like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Friday, if I'm lucky, sometimes spills over to Saturday. And in between that, like there's either notes or changes. So uh, it's hard to
It's
it's hard.
constantly shifting.
Yeah, exactly. But so I think that's why some of my days are 12 hours versus some are only 6, which is interesting, but I have the luxury of being able to like, flip flop in between. And I try my best to make sure that I have a weekend now, because that was my goal last year. Especially with most freelancers, we always work weekends and holidays. And I would like to have a better work-life balance. And if that means that I have to do like a doctor's shift of like 12 hours for 3 days, I'd rather do that than sacrifice my weekend when I could be relaxing, or at least do my errands or do other things that are not work related. Um, and I would say that I have something like more fantastical, or like a secret that I do to like manage that, but it's like literally, what comics is like. And for those that don't, I mean, it's really just like catching things while things are flying in the air, it seems like, and spinning plates. So, um, taking each day as it comes and try to get as much done when there's not a lot on you. Like the weeks of the holidays are great because you're getting almost zero emails and you get a lot done. It is phenomenal.
Well, and also it's like, you're talking about having to do like 3 12-hour days so you can have a weekend and everything like that. That type of like brute forcing when you have deadlines and stuff, that's not, my wife does that. She's an architect, and like she has, I'm not trying to make it seem like comic artists and comic creators aren't special, but it's like sometimes you just got to do those things to get through that stuff. And
Yeah.
it is interesting though, because you mentioned that, part of it is like doing like email and kind of administrative stuff. And I think one of the tricky things about being a comic artist in particular is that you kind of have to always have one foot in today and one foot in tomorrow, because you don't want to finish Know Your Station and not know what you're doing next, probably. Like, how much of your focus is on the actual comic work at hand versus building for tomorrow in a variety of ways?
It's so funny that you mentioned that, because I think I brought up the term hurry up and wait the other day, which is like my essential view of what comics are like, because you'll start something a year beforehand and like have to get it done for publishing and printing, and you have to hurry up and then wait and wait for it to come out and see the response. And when you think about direct market, which is like, all my 5 issues that are going to come out, but then you're almost hurry up and waiting again for the trade paperback to come out. So for instance, like True Cult's trade paperback doesn't come out till like later this year, even though we just wrapped up issue 5 at the end of, I think it was like Christmas Eve. And so it's great because you almost get like, well, True Cult specifically got many lives, but all these comics get like multiple lives in a sense. And so you're managing like these past stories that you've worked on and not forgotten about, but definitely like you're not wading through the waters of it like I am right now with Know Your Station, like still currently drawing it. And also being like, okay, well, there's this pitch with this other person. What do I have to get done? Like, what's the task list? What are the deadlines for like whether or not this publisher has picked it up? And when do we start that? And like constantly having to manage a schedule or looking towards a year in the future of what your workload is going to be like, which is so wild to me still. And still manage like your, direct communication with those collaborators and also future editors and things like that. And it is, it's like getting whiplash every day. And
I shouldn't laugh at that. I'm sorry.
it is hilarious. But I think any creative probably feels that in a sense, right? Like musicians and like having to plan tours or, having to pay like a deposit for a venue, but then you get that money back later, right? It's almost kind of the same in sense that freelancing and specifically comics and direct market, which I don't know quite what book market is like, and I'm sure it has its own
Fun things.
plethora of, yeah, yeah. But it's it's interesting once you get the hang of it because it's almost like watching a mother manage five kids seamlessly, right? Or at least that's what I imagine from like a TV show or movie. But like that's how I feel like with managing now. Granted, I have help, so it's not as difficult as me just staying up late every night managing everything myself. But when you are drawing that much and managing projects uh, and multiple at the same time, or like trying to pitch to get your next gig, it's yeah, it's quite chaotic.
I didn't know you had an assistant.
Yeah, so Kelly, it was like I think it was not this past September, but the September before. I had a call out on Instagram because I was like, I need just an admin like hour or two a week to like manage some of my incoming emails. And also like maybe like make a calendar schedule for me. And she has stayed on ever since, and it is amazing. She rules. She actually manages my commissions, my Zest World stuff, and she also helps me with some of my social media stuff, which is nice.
That is really nice.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's the stuff that I mean, I actually like email. I'm like the sociopath who actually enjoys email for some reason. It's like I like the constant communication, kind of feeling like I'm in the thick of things. I've gotten increasingly bad at it, unfortunately, but that type of stuff though is the type of thing that's going to bog you down and take you away from your work. And I think I don't know. I mean, it's like you talk about all this. You haven't even really like talked about the covers part of it. And when you're doing like one a week, basically, that's a serious amount of work where not only do you have the work to do, but you have the initial engagement with whoever is hiring you to do that cover. You have, because some of it's for Know Your Station, some of it was for True Cult, but on top of that, you were doing covers for all kinds of other things. So you have the communication with whoever was in charge to get the job. Then you have to do the work. You have to get it out there, and you probably have to talk about it.
Yep.
People can't see me putting fingers down, but there's 4 fingers up. Those are 4 things. It's interesting because I kind of feel like you have this like time shifted element as a comic creator. I previously described it as time traveling with when I talked to Ed Brubaker about this, but it's like there's always like this version of like past you, present you, and future you that's always having to like factor into a single project that people don't really think about. And covers are a huge part of that because those kind of parachute in out of nowhere sometimes, I imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. So cover work is and was my first initial goal in comics, which was originally I would pick up as a fan of comics and like as a collector, I would pick up comic covers and be like, that seems like the dream. I would love to do that. And so now that it is like my career, a part of, storytelling, it is such a gratifying feeling, especially because every time when I think, I wonder what my next cover is going to be, specifically my editor, Heather Antos, amazing. She has already emailed me that day, and I'm like, oh, wow, I didn't even have to like go searching for, she just like read my mind. And it's nice to have these projects, but it's at the same time, I would say just as much work as doing like interiors, because depending on what the IP is, like I've done stuff for Star Wars, Star Trek. I've done new IP stuff too, which and all of these IPs are totally different, and they're all managed by either the studio that does the TV show or higher ups in these other companies, and they it's like wading through almost like calling out to be like, hey, does this look good? And then they have to check with their buddy to see if it looks good. And then, it's like playing a game of telephone. And so that's number one. I also really love emails specifically for covers because they're shorter term projects and they're not as lengthwise of work, but it's just as fun in terms of interacting with my editor or like some instances, like indie creators who are like doing it for a Kickstarter, which some of those are like some of my favorites as well. And they are super gratifying, but then there comes the work, like you said, where it's like, okay, well, they trusted me to do this cover, so I'm going to promote the heck out of it and make sure that this is a book that's like pre-ordered because I want the numbers to do well. I like these creators on this book. I want them to have a successful run on this series and to where they get more work, right? And then also, that is another stack of books for my short box at home that I need to bring to cons, or another book on my shelf that I've like completed, right? And it's always like a cool goal achievement. So anyway, I like that they're bite-sized versions of like instead of long-term finishing a book. Like that's always such a great achievement, but it's also a really fun achievement to be like, oh yeah, I worked on a Deep Space Nine cover.
Yeah.
That show's really cool. You know what I mean? To be like, and then you can interact with all these like new fans because you've like now been integrated and folded into a part of that IP a little bit. So
it's funny. I never really thought about covers being particularly appealing to you. And I probably should have, because when we were at Emerald City Comic Con this year and I did an interview with you about like, work you were particularly proud of, the first two things that you pointed out were a cover you did for Mindset, I believe it was, and then another one you did for Star Wars Adventures. And it was interesting that your mind immediately went to the covers. And maybe part of that is because it's like when you're in the mix of all those pages, it can be difficult to kind of like point to one in specific versus covers, which you inherently like everyone kind of is like, oh, I know that, like, I love that cover or whatever. But also, what is it that you find particularly appealing about the cover art form? What made that a goal for you before you ever even kind of got into doing it?
One thing that I'll just not rebuttal, but like add on to, I think because I answered covers because how I was saying that the many lives of comics, like I feel like I can't quite answer for specific series yet. Like True Cult is definitely one of them, but because it's not serialized and in its own book form, I can't be like this. You know what
sure.
I mean? Like, and show it to you. But what I like about the cover art form is its own specific form of like advertising.
Oh yeah.
That is number one. It's like a piece of art that people have to be drawn to in order to complete a transaction. And the transaction is that you were hired to grab somebody's eye off a shelf, which there's so many, right? It's the magic eye of a shelf at a comic shop, and say, hey, you should buy me. And not only are you doing that, but you're connecting them to a story that is like going to be an experience. And so you're almost like shepherding them into an experience. This sounds very convoluted for an answer for drawing covers, but I swear it is how I feel about it. So it's like, not only do you get to kind of be a part of the team, depending on who makes the book and how, integrated you are into the team and everything, or, how they view cover artists, but like, I love reading comics, and because I am such a huge fan of comics, the fact that I get to read a book ahead of time and get to draw a cover to bring somebody in and also be kind of almost a part of that series with your own flavor to it is it's like an interesting art form for direct market, and it's sometimes either forgotten or not really paid attention to. So I don't know. I find it interesting. And then you like have to consider the factor of like, does this cover work well and like complement the interiors, or does it make sense that they are being paired together amongst a whole bunch of other things? So I think because it's extremely convoluted and complicated, that's why I love it.
Well, it's funny. What you were saying makes total sense to me because I have 3 rules to a great cover. One, you actually named 2 of them. One is that it has to stand out on the stands. Like that's essential. It is marketing by itself. 2 is it should reflect what's happening if you're doing a main cover, like an A or B or whatever, if it's a main cover, it should reflect what's happening inside. If you're doing like a variant that's for like, I don't know, National Sandwich Month at Marvel or something like that, which please don't do that, Marvel. You do too many weird giant months already. Then that doesn't have to be reflective. But the third one is it just has to look good. Like, that's an essential part of it. It's funny, though, because what you're talking about, I don't remember. I've referenced this multiple times in the podcast. I don't actually remember who told me this originally, but an artist once told me that they love covers because it's a business card for them. Every time you have a cover out there, it's a business card for your art. And people always kind of see covers. Like when you walk the stands, if you see something, you're like, wow, Julian Totino Tedesco is unbelievable. I'm going to check out this book. And then next thing you know, you see his art again. It keeps drawing you back to that specific artist. Mm-hmm. I imagine in some ways, covers have helped build more fans for you than your interiors have.
Absolutely. Oh, 100%. They're more accessible and faster to be done. And then even if 10% translates to somebody reading my book, like, that's great. Yeah. I'm very happy about that, or if 10% of that translates to being a collector of my covers, also great. Like, I love that so much that I've had so many people now respond to that message being like, oh, I just noticed I have 3 covers missing out of my collection. I was like, well, the fact that you've collected all of them already, thank you, so.
And now, a quick word from one of our sponsors. Zoop is starting 2023 with a bang. In January, there'll be new campaigns launched each week from some incredible creators. Spearheaded by Paula Lore's Pink Midnight presents The Butterfly House, there are also campaigns by Craig Rasmussen, plus Waco Comics' Jeff Messer, Cam Kirkow, Doug Wood, and more. All these creators greatly appreciate your support over at zoop.gg. It takes less than 30 seconds to sign up, and the checkout is easy and intuitive. Add multiple rewards and add-ons into your cart, provide some info during checkout, and you're done. No confusing additional steps in finalizing your pledge, and no post-campaign surveys. For creators looking to crowdfund your project, Zoop are the comic book crowdfunding specialists and are currently open for submissions. Check out some case studies on their blog at blog.zoop.gg and email them at hello@wearezoop.com to start the campaign. And now, back to the show. I think it's funny that all this stuff, like maybe not the covers, but all the different things we're talking about where it's the not just interiors work you're doing. A lot of times we bucket this into the idea of quote unquote side hustle. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really funny that the premise of a side hustle is basically, it's really just more jobs. I mean, like, let's be real about it. Like, I feel like the side hustle, that term might need to go away at some point because I don't know if it's as all-encompassing as it needs to be or as descriptive as it needs to be with things like this.
I think it ends up turning to multiple hustles.
Yeah, exactly.
I am hustling so hard in many different ways. Yeah.
Okay, I have to ask, this is the point where you're going to explain something to me. You're doing Zest World, where you do digital commissions, I think, and other things. Mm-hmm. I have to admit, I have read a lot about Zest World. I have looked at a lot of things involving it. I've talked to people about Zest World. I don't totally understand what Zest World is. How do you describe Zest World?
I would describe it as like a platform that's it's a mix between Patreon, an art dealer, and a webtoon / Substack app. Okay. It's very cool. Like it's a very new thing and it's figuring itself out, and it's fun to be a part of that role of creators like Joelle Jones and a ton of really cool folks, and utilize the platform and also be brought on as a creator that is listened to and respected, because the majority of me joining balanced on the NFT thing. And I said, I do not offer NFTs of my work. I will not. Is that okay before I join? And they said, absolutely. And so they actually ended up changing it to where you could just turn that off completely.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And they've been really cool. And one of the things that I joined for specifically is I wanted to offer more affordable commissions, especially for those that can't go to shows, like immunocompromised, or, can't quite drive to a show or anything like that, and have something to where they could still feel like they got something special. And until I have, an art rep that is able to sell like my originals and manage a list for me, I thought that this was a really nice way to like bring a lot of my community from Patreon and stuff over who have been asking about commissions. And it just kind of worked out. It was great.
I never really thought about the idea of like it's kind of like adding inclusivity to con-like elements even though that's not really what it's designed for. It seems like it kind of, especially with the ability to turn off NFTs, which I have to admit was one of my initial points of hesitancy, because I was like, what is this? Why is NFT such a big focus for it? But it seems like you can kind of make it what you want it to be.
Yeah, it's a super manageable app where I think because it's so new that it's almost kind of like getting in on Instagram or something from the ground up, or Patreon. The people who have been on Patreon for so long, they're making like 20 grand a month and things like that.
Yeah.
It's almost like, because you're being able to like mold the platform to benefit you specifically as a creator, has been beneficial for me, because I use it when I need it, and I maintain it for what I previously used Substack for, which was email updates and updating about what I have coming out this month or things like that. So it's nice because the folks that want to collect my original art or want to commission me will also get information about, if you do go to a comic shop this month, here's what you'll see.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Try to like manage to bring everything together as opposed to like 18 different places.
It seems like it would be really nice to kind of get in on the ground floor in a planned way. I feel like I've been on the ground floor with a lot of platforms lately unintentionally, like with Mastodon and Hive and all these other things. There's too much learning of social platforms right now. I'm exhausted.
Me too, buddy.
I have to ask, is that weird for you? Because you are, like, you're very good at social media. I would say that if I have been asked about, like, who does this stuff well, and I'm always like, Liana's great at this. Has that, the shifting winds on there, been weird for you in particular?
Absolutely. So a lot of, I don't know if a lot of people know, but I work with Jaslyn Stone, who's a comics marketer, on a lot of what my social media events are. I don't know if events is the term that I would use, but a lot of targeted things that I work on are based around plans that Jaslyn has helped me with, which is amazing. So I would not give myself almost any credit at all in terms of that. Like, she is by far an expert at social media, comics marketing and
executing those campaigns and visions and stuff.
Yeah, like letting you know how to execute those. So like I do the social media, but she's like, hey, you should talk about this week. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's super smart. Who would have thought, and I managing multiple platforms while they're all disintegrating and dying, it's a fun time. It's great to watch this dumpster fire happen as it rolls down a river, and contributing to it is it's quite a time. I have no idea how to describe what the landscape of this is whatsoever, but I do say, like, I think trying my best and trying to stay positive on social media and things like that, I think really help and allows me to, one, have a really good view of social media in terms of what I utilize it for, which is mostly work, like I would say 90% work, and also try to engage with people who have stayed on there, which are usually fans or collaborators, creators that I really enjoy. So,
I mean, the thing about the social media stuff is you can't really control what you can't control. Like you can't make Hive work perfectly. You can't, make Twitter not crazy right now. You can't make Mastodon make perfect sense to every single human being who tries it and everything like that. You can't do all these things. All you can do is control how you act on there and what you're kind of putting out there. And it seems like you're doing a good job of that. Or Jaslyn is.
Wrap that up eloquently and way better than what I would have described.
It's because I've had the perfect amount of coffee. If I have one more drip of it, I'm done. It's toast. Disaster. But okay, last thing before we get into your comics. I did want to ask about cons. You said you went to 7. I actually was trying to count it. I thought it was 300 last year for you. So I was way under that. How did it feel? Was it nice getting back?
Absolutely. I did a recap of
Was that the reel?
I did a reel of, and it was earlier this year, right when I got back and started, and I've been trying to be better about taking videos, like being with friends, like work friends and things like that. And I posted one, and I had two friends respond to be like, "It was so great to see you again. Like, I had such a fun time. I can't wait to see you again." And I like almost started weeping because I didn't realize how much I had. And you and I got to see each
Yeah,
other,
yeah.
and it's such a. I think for me, that was the biggest change over the last 2 years that I so desperately needed. And it's mostly just to remind myself why I do this career slash calling to begin with, which is connecting with other people that so desperately love this medium as much as I do, and being able to meet like-minded people and like just have a great time and enjoy yourself.
And you got to take a picture in a very large bathroom at Thought Bubble.
I did. When Kieran Gillen turned to me and said, "Did you see the toilets yet?" And I said, "Nope, I don't know what you're talking about." And we had an entire group, like gang of like 15 people, be like, "I want to see the toilets too." And to be shepherded and shown the utmost legendary Thought Bubble toilets by who I would only describe as, I guess, a Thought Bubble leader is not the word I want to use.
Ooh, a
Like
thought
legend.
leader? A thought. Oh,
Yeah.
that's dumb. Sorry, my bad. I have regrets. I think he's past the DJing thing, but I mean, he was an essential part of the opening days or like the
Yeah.
heyday of Thought Bubble.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also watching Tula DJ the convention in which she had like helped,
Build it.
build, it was like such an amazing. And I sat next to Al Ewing all weekend. It was very much being like, I felt by those three specifically very welcome to Thought Bubble, and Chloe Green, who does all the, I think, the management of the convention itself. And it was one of the best con experiences. It's going to be very difficult to top that. You know what I mean?
I feel like that is probably the most renowned kind of convention experience for creators right now. Like the American version, the closest we have for America is probably Heroes Con, at least from the people I
Yes,
talk to. It's
I
like
was about to literally describe that. Yeah.
yeah, those are the two that I most want to go to. It's like I always end up going to the bigger cons because then we can go and do things in New York or whatever. But it's like I really want to go to North Carolina and I really want to go to Thought Bubble.
Not to be like that guy. And I love Heroes because it's, I would say, amongst the top like three in my book. But my local con is, I started calling it the twin of Heroes,
Memphis?
because it is, yeah, it is definitely, it's like a creators summer camp, and everybody's so nice here and so great, and then you all get to hang out, and it's wonderful. But yeah, I those two are the two cons that you should absolutely go to.
Well, how are the
10 out of 10.
toilets at Memphis?
Not as luxurious, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I only go to a con that has really nice toilets, so
Yeah, yeah.
we'll see about that. But all right, well, let's talk about some comics. I don't want to dive too deep into the recently wrapped True Cold, but it is such a fascinating project to me because you had already released it thanks to its Kickstarter.
Hmm.
You released it again over at IDW. It's
Hmm.
now going to be released again at some point this year in trade paperback form. It has had several lives, several permutations, and it's probably the only comic you will ever do where you basically create enough merch to seem like you work at a burger place or really any place, to be honest. But how did that second run go? Did it feel like a lot of people were discovering it once it kind of came out through the traditional direct market type ways?
Absolutely. I have actually had more connection with retail comics retail in my entire like career thus far, and it is the majority of it is because it's someone that works at a shop reaches out or comes to me at a con or whatever and says, "I love this book so much, I have been trying to push it on to everybody," etc., etc. I even had one person at LA Comic Con say, "Hey, I've tried to push this on a lot of people, and some people are like, eh." And like, do you ever get discouraged when somebody isn't interested in this book in particular? And I said, no, that's the entire point of the book itself, is like, it's very much what I would consider a cult classic type thing. It's like,
I mean, it's in the name.
if you're interested in that kind of thing, you're going to be interested in it. And so it's literally people like you who are the ones invested in it and trying to push everybody is the reason why that would never bother me, because somebody like you likes it that much, or somebody like Dennis who has bought every single issue and cosplayed multiple times as a Burger Lord employee and sent us pictures of like custom Lego sets
Oh my
that
God.
he made of like a Burger Lord like food truck, to where I'm like, if somebody's not interested in it, that's fine. But it's also like, comics is such a great medium that not everybody has to like that specific type of genre or book or anything.
The thing is, you know, the Kickstarter was great because it allowed you and everyone you're involved with, that was on the book, you know, Scott and everybody else, like and Jaslyn working her magic and everything on there. It allowed you to reach a lot of people that you would have like direct connection to, and also extend slightly beyond that. But
yeah,
the direct market, I mean, the beauty of the direct market is that it adds to your reach. It adds to your ability to find different people through comic shops and everything like that. Hopefully when the trade comes out, you'll do the same through comic shops again, and also through the book market and everything like that. But I mean, that's the thing I think is really interesting about True Cult is like, you've done interiors for other books. You've done interiors for like notable books, all kinds of things. I kind of feel like True Cult is the one that really felt like your baby.
Yes, absolutely. That series specifically, I think, because that's what I would quote unquote pick, like to be like, this is what I'm really proud of, is because we had complete control in the beginning before it was picked up by a publisher. And because we got to do all the fun things with it that you can't necessarily do when you are with a publisher first.
Sure.
And then for those to see it and the publisher to be like, hey, we like the cut of your jib, and we also like all the stuff that you did with it. And then also, why don't we add on to that and do like many other things, you know? Often gives us more control, I think, in what the life of it is after it's done the storytelling that it's said. And it also gives us more world building even after.
Yeah. Well, and the ability to build a community too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's probably one of the most important things to me in terms of the life outside of you creating the story, is to have the connection to other people who read it and to be like, yeah, not only did I create it and I totally know exactly what you're saying and I love that, but two, you know, you can laugh over like inside jokes or dumb inside jokes that I've like put into the background or like things like that, and to like spend time with those who have bought it and invested in it and really enjoyed it, and then kind of make it its own thing outside of it being just a book, right? Mm-hmm. And what's great about IDW picking it up is they were so respectful to like allowing us to give the backers prior like everything before, you know, bringing it over to IDW, but then also being like, what can we do to enhance the experience for not only the people who have backed it already and like already read it, but new people, and like giving it the second life or third life or, you know, 666 life. And so like add more content and like do totally different things. So it was, yeah, it's my baby,
yeah.
You know, and Scott is like such a cool collaborator, and we had been picked up by a previous publisher
Before the Kickstarter, right?
Yeah, and with it failing and everything, it was nice to have like the same mentality with him, to be like, oh no, we're still doing this, right? Like he's one of my closest collaborators in that we just have, you know, really good trust and communication. And so for us to both be like, yeah, we both believe in this, like, let's just do it anyway.
Yeah.
How are you gonna, you know, it's very thoughtful, and like to have the whole team like kind of trust and believe in you too. It's very special. It's very nice.
And now, a quick word from one of our sponsors. It's Bad Idea, and the Renegade comic book publisher is back doing their crazy antics. The latest includes putting a comic from Mark Waid and David Lapham, The First Supper, into a recent edition of Previews for Order completely randomly. or it was the latest, until Bad Idea also snuck a new comic from Joshua Dysart and Kano the first 7 days into the same edition of previews. Don't worry if you missed it, because you probably should have, as it was hidden under the publisher named B-Side Press with fake creator names. That's how Bad Idea rolls, though, making notable comics with great creators in extraordinarily unusual ways. Keep your eye out for whatever's next with Bad Idea, if you can. And now, back to the show. You know, I know one of your favorite comics personally is The Wicked and the Divine. Like, it was a big book for you. We've talked about that before. It's interesting because I'm not saying that like this is your Wicked and the Divine, but I think that it's like where you're really tapping into the mix of like more people reading it, but also those people getting super passionate about it. Because I think that's where a lot of the fun lies for creators. And granted, I can't really say too much about that because I've never actually made a comic myself. But like when people get really invested in it and they start making those Lego sets and doing all that stuff, that's kind of like when you went to the wake for Wicked and Divine, didn't you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, it's like
yeah.
you don't get that without the passion. And like most comics don't get something like that. Being able to tap into that, that's when you're starting to get into like the really cool stuff, I imagine.
Absolutely. Oh, I can't wait for a True Cult meetup, like at a burger place. Are you kidding?
Oh my God,
But
that
also,
sounds
you
so
have
good.
like you have off-panel like parties kind of at cons. It's the same difference.
I've had
you know?
one. I was so horrified that no one was going to show up. And then way too many people showed up for me to talk to. And I was like, I don't know what to do with this.
Yeah, that's just invite me next time. I'll, I also would totally go to one anyway.
I ended up playing NBA Jam with some of my listeners, and it was super awesome. I had it in an arcade. It was really great. Anyways, let's talk about Know Your Station. It's your new 5-issue miniseries from you, writer Sarah Gailey, colorist Rebecca Nalty, and letterer Cardinal Ray over at Boom Studios. I'm going to do the solicit. The wealthiest people in the solar system abandoned the Earth for a private sanctuary in space, leaving the rest of us to die amidst cataclysmic climate change. Quick comment, that just seems way too real. But the 1% won't be safe for long. A murderer is on the loose, specifically targeting the super rich. Soon, Elise, an employee of the billionaire's space station, is wrapped up in a deadly investigation, with each issue featuring a new, diabolically different kill. The first issue was a sellout. Not only that, it was also the 12th best comic of the year per the Mary Sue, which for a single issue is a real feather in the entire team's cap. So good job by you all. It's a very solid sci-fi comic and one that you're doing great work on. I'm curious as to how this project first came together, because I remember talking to you before, and I knew you were doing True Cult, and I thought you were working on a graphic novel, and then this came out of there, and I'm like, if anybody's just gonna like throw in another 5-issue miniseries, it's gonna be Liana. So how did this one come together?
By the way, I did do that graphic novel.
Of course you did.
It just still hasn't been announced yet.
That's graphic novels for you.
Yeah, earlier, I want to say it was around my birthday. My editor, Elizabeth Bray, she had emailed me, which I was like, this is a great birthday present.
I hope you said it exactly like that.
Oh, yeah. Like, she knows for sure. So Elizabeth was my original editor who brought me onto the Star Wars thing, and like facilitated my tryout for Lucasfilm and everything. And like handed off the reins to Heather Antos, who ended up being my editor. But when she had moved over to Boom, I wasn't sure if we were going to be in contact again. And then she surprised me with that amazing email and was like, hey, would you be interested in this? And I got so excited that I couldn't read the email, but I had to pass it to my old roommate from college who flats my work, Jimmy Savage. I passed it to him and said, can you read this for me? And he's like, okay. And so he's like reading out loud, and he just looks up at me and goes, I think this would be perfect for you. And I was like, I think so too, but I just need to reread this a couple other times. And so I read it again the next day, and I was like, this pitch sounds amazing, but I have not been in a position other than small work for hire shorts that are long-term projects with being matched up with people who I don't know very well. After having come off of True Cult, where Scott and I know each other very well, it was a very interesting proposal to where I reached out to Elizabeth and I was like, as long as, you're helping, she's a great editor. So I was like, yeah, I think I totally want to do this. And finding out that it was Sarah Gailey made me say, okay, I'll just like go buy a couple of their books and, read it and see what kind of, work they have outside of comics. And I bought their Eat the Rich that was previously at Boom as well. And I had already pre-said yes before reading everything. And I think before I signed the contract, I had read their book, The Echo Wife. And it's one of the first novels that I had actually read in like a day and a half. Usually I'll read a novel in like a week or like a month or something like that, but it was like a day and a half and I blew through it and I was like, oh my gosh, I cannot wait to work with them on this. This is amazing. And we ended up having, like meetings to do like character designs and all this stuff. And it was really cool to be with like the entire Boom team along with Gailey for creating like the visuals for this world and then moving towards that to like sequential pages and stuff. And since then, it's interesting because usually like working on a book for me is swapped and it's like, I know this person really well and then we work on things. It's flopped and like, I didn't know Gailey at all. And now we've like become such great collaborators and like, we really enjoy talking to each other and they give me like amazing recommendations for like movies and like we make playlists and like things like that. So it's like really fun to have gotten to know both Gailey and Elizabeth this entire process. And it was actually, this is the first year. So Rebecca Nolte and I have worked on so many things together. She Said Destroy, this unnamed graphic novel actually that we just wrapped up. And then Elizabeth surprised me and said, hey, guess what? Rebecca's on this book. And I was like, yes. And I actually got to meet her this year when I went over for Thought Bubble. And I was like, can you believe that we are now working on 3 books and we only just met? Like, comics is so wild to me in that sense. So it's been a really fun process. And the number one, that Mary Sue article, I definitely celebrated that night because that was such a cool thing. I have like a Google alert set up for like articles or whatever, and it would have came in the next day, but I think Mark Bouchard texted me that I was on this article and I was like, wait, what? Like I was reading through and saw their book listed, It Took Luke, first, and then I scrolled past and I was like, that image looks familiar, and it was our book, and I was like, what? Like, very excited. So it's been that's my first sold out book to go to second printing, like personally. I've been on books like covers like End After End that have gone to second printing, which is really fun, but to have like a book of mine drawn to go to second printing is like such a huge achievement for me. That's something that I've wanted for a long time. So it's very awesome that it was with Sarah and Elizabeth and all those folks. It's like such an amazing team.
I do think it's really heartening to hear that, the part where you get hired in for a book that you don't know the creator, the writer on and everything like that. Those types of things, I'm not saying that they're like universally bad. They're not universally good, but I always kind of think of them as like arranged marriages where you're like, you hope it works out, but naturally you don't know if the collaboration is going to be there. It's really nice that it sounds like it started as that, but it quickly shifted towards being more like the collaborations you prefer, where it's like it's really close and you're all discussing things and kind of planning things together.
Absolutely. And I really think that that's just like a really cool skill that Elizabeth has, to be able to see 2 creators, to be like, they'll get along, they'll make a great book. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, seriously, Gailey's one of the coolest people that I've gotten to work with in comics. And so is Elizabeth. Like, and I think that's why it's not being like pleasantly surprised, but kind of is the easiest form of how I can describe that, to be like, this has been such a cool experience. And like, it's nothing I would have ever expected being like, paired up on a book like that. Because direct market is wild and, comics is wild in general. But having kind of like an arranged scenario could go either way.
Yeah.
Period. So I got really lucky. There's a lot of luck in comics, and I feel like this is a good one.
Well, the thing is you mentioned earlier about how part of the job is relationship building. And the thing is you met Elizabeth, who seems to get you. And Elizabeth, no, having someone that's not only on like, believes in you, but also gets you, you can trust somebody like that to put you in a good position to succeed. And so part of it's luck, but also part of it's like having that relationship in a specific way that helps you, like, you have trust there now that Elizabeth can be like, all right, if Elizabeth comes to me with a project, it's like something to really pay attention to.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the majority of my editors that I work with on a daily basis are like that. Like they just get me. And I'll meet a lot of, like, even for covers and such, the collaborator or the writers and the artists and everybody on these books that I do covers for that I maybe not even know, like I know that my editor knows that we'd probably get along. Like I just found out at LA Comic Con that Jackson Lansing and Colin Kelly both play Destiny, and I'm a big
Oh my
like
God.
Destiny fan. And they, like I've been doing a couple covers for them, and we all think each other's cool. Like they worked on Vault books and stuff, and so it's just like it's cool to know that like Heather knows that I'd get along with whoever X on a book too, as well, right? Along with Elizabeth. Elizabeth knows like a majority of my interests because we've worked together on a couple things. So it's cool to be like, Elizabeth knew, yeah, Liana would like to draw a whole bunch of really weird, fucked up murders, right? Yeah, why not? Absolutely.
I feel like it's going to be the year 3000 and people will still be playing Destiny.
Oh, for sure.
That game is eternal.
Bungie does not quit. Bungie does not quit.
If Vegas had odds on what would last longer, Twitter or Destiny, I would have bet the farm on Twitter and I would have lost everything. Destiny is immortal. It's unbelievable. I remember asking you at Emerald City this year, I'm like, what? People still play Destiny? And you're like, yeah. I play with tons of people.
Oh my gosh. Well, it's interesting because I was thinking today, I just picked up the new Pokemon game. I have not gamed in almost a year. It'll be since like February 20th because it was the week of my birthday. I started Witch Queen for Destiny. And then I just, obviously had 8 books that I drew,
Right.
as well as a million conventions. So I've taken a long hiatus from gaming, which has been a little sad, but there's a huge comics community that plays Destiny, which I did not realize. Yeah.
Every time, like, I take a mental note. There's like the people who like basketball and the people who like Destiny, and there's one person who lives at the center of that Venn diagram, and it's you. Well, and comics. There's the 3. You're the only one who lives in the middle, I think. Maybe James Lucas Jones. Robert Wilson. Does he? I don't know if he's a basketball guy though.
Oh yeah.
Is he?
I'm like almost positive he is.
He lives in Dallas. He should be.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, this is a question that I've never asked anyone, and I find it really. This is like the most basic question, and it's something I've never really like thought to actually dig into in specific. So you get Know Your Station, you have this project. There's Know Your Station, the email that you get Jimmy to read, and then there's Know Your Station, the first issue that gets released. And then like the pages and everything that goes into it. What is that process between getting the email and and actually working on the pages? Like, was there a development process for kind of like figuring out what Elise looks like, developing the first resort, the space station everybody's on, all those things? Was there like a process before you ever started drawing the pages?
Yeah, absolutely. Like the biggest thing in comics, which I feel like isn't talked about a lot, is the contract process. Publishers have so many books all the time, and each contract is probably completely different depending on who the creator is and what type of deal they get and all that stuff. So my contract had taken every contract probably takes a long period of time, and I don't remember the timeline quite well, but I think we had started talking about the development process. And so I started doing character designs after I said yes, probably a month or so in, and working with that entire Boom team, which was awesome, having like, video meetings, kind of just being like, okay, what did you envision? And because a lot of it, Boom is such an interesting publisher in that this is creator owned, but they have like an art directorial team, which is cool, and like editorial has say. And so it's collaborating with like both your creative team and also the publisher. And, Sarah Gailey, who had like all this stuff laid out, which was awesome, like Pinterest boards and ideas and things like that. So it was like so great to almost writer's room approach the visuals for this entire thing and get notes back. And at the same time, we're all being very efficient, like the contracts being written, like all the stuff. And so that as to not like delay production, which is, first issue, like drawing the first issue and everything. And like, this is the first series that I've actually drawn covers before I've drawn the interior pages. So almost, because now depending on, I guess, the distributor, they need images like way far in advance. And so I think it was like a 4 to 5 months of like development and doing visuals. And the last thing that I actually developed was the space station itself, because I would not consider a machine creative in terms of drawing and building machines. And so I think I got like the Scott Robertson book, like How to Draw, to be like, I need to make this space station as interesting as possible, because when I'm going from She Said Destroy, which is essentially a castle that I drew, to something that seems somewhat realistic but slightly fantastical in the sense like, what would a whole bunch of billionaires shoot themselves up into space with?
Space yacht.
Yeah, it literally is a space yacht. So like, it's weird because it went from like something that I think I originally drew something that seemed more Mobius style.
Sure.
And I kept moving over to like, what's a weirder silhouette that I can draw, and ended up being a space yacht, which was great. And I think it hit the nail on the head in terms of like the dark comedy in the book.
Well, I mean, I think that's one of the interesting things about the first issue is that it's a sci-fi book, but also a lot of it is commentary on like the classes and, the rich and everything like that. And so maybe a space yacht wouldn't be the most efficient type of ship. But at the same time, when you're trying to make very specific commentary, I think it really hits the nail on the head right there. And
yeah,
I mean, when you were doing that development, when you were like figuring out what Elise looks like, figuring out what the first resort looks like, everything like that, were you and Sarah talking a fair amount? Because it sounds like Sarah had an idea kind of going in as to maybe like some of the environmental things or kind of what this world would look like.
I think they had a lot of the logistics planned out in terms of like how it would operate, unless like ideas, like they trusted me completely on visuals.
Sure.
And so it was nice to have like input from being like, hey, what do you see as like inspiration reference? And then also going to Elizabeth and being like, is there anything specifically that you want to see before I get started on what seemingly is like, I think I put a lot of pressure on myself for doing designs, because, for a book to be about class and about, taking advantage of society and all these things, everything has to be diverse and realistic but also have interesting silhouettes and memorable visuals and things like that. So I stress myself out unrealistically, I'm assuming, to provide like this very hopefully memorable thing. And also I have to remember I have to draw this for at least 5 months.
Yeah.
Over and over and over and over again. So remember that when you're putting unrealistic details on these things, right? So I think having that amount of trust from both the creative and editorial team, and focusing on what each character design says about that specific character worked out pretty well. I just did a lot of research in terms of what do these billionaires in real life look like? What are specific pigments and fragments that only people who have money can buy? And like, we think about like current society now, where like a literal billionaire will walk into like a 5-star Michelin rated blah, blah, blah restaurant in like sweatpants or shoes that look like they were taken out of the garbage, but they are specifically meant to look like that. And that's like a commentary on how messed up our extremely classist system is. And, like, I'm sure you saw I don't remember it wasn't like Prada or anything, but like there was like a Converse sold for like $1 million that was like messed up and made to look like somebody had worn it for like 5 years and like looked like garbage. Yeah. And that article had come out like right as I was developing all these character designs, and I was just like, wow, that's too current, too real. Yeah. So
God, that must have been a very interesting process. I do think it's an interesting book too from a challenge standpoint, because there are 3 attributes that I think are, I don't want to say difficult, but they kind of all offer their own challenges to it. One, it is shockingly ultra-violent at parts, even though I guess one of them is just a hologram of the previous ultra-violence. So it's like not manifested currently, but there's that. There's the drug trips, which are always like, everyone's got their own feel for drug trips. And then I think the really unique wrinkle to this is you could say that the arguable co-lead, probably just co-lead of the series, isn't actually a physical being. It's the AI of the space station, St. Bridget, which is not something you can really draw. It's kind of like you have to like provide space for Cardinal to make sure that the dialogue is in there and make sure that that's considered in the process. Were there any unique challenges to those elements, or really just the book overall?
Yes. And I think that's more so me being more a parent of being conscious of my skill set as a creator, in that I'm getting great notes throughout this entire series. And I love notes. I know some artists are like precious with their work sometimes, which I respect, but sometimes I think I maybe want to give myself more room for growth. And so when I get good notes, I start remembering things like, oh, maybe I'm not giving enough space for lettering. Oh, maybe, I want to make sure that this panel leads well to the next panel. So what can I do, like, as I'm drawing it, like without notes? How do I make sure that this panel looks dynamic, but also like reads the way it should read with a comic, while considering the lettering, or while considering how much time Rebecca has to color this panel, or, vice versa. And having like an AI presence, one of the developmental things actually that happened during those meetings with Boom was I asked if I could give St. Bridget a physical form that I can use sometimes, because like when you read St. Bridget's dialogue, it's like, to me, it seems very sarcastic sometimes and funny, but like I feel like you're not always going to register that or consider the importance of like Elise's interactions with St. Bridget, unless sometimes you consider that it's like Elise isn't just talking to herself. She's like, it's like talking to Siri.
Sure.
But as if Siri is so developed that it's almost like we've gotten to this point in the future that we've relied so heavily on technology that you look at it kind of like the movie Her or things like that, where you look at it as like its own sentient being or like whatever. And I wanted...
You got to personify it.
Right. And because these rich billionaires are like, they don't even see the staff, right? But they do see St. Bridget, which St. Bridget helps run the ship and like helps, manage everything. So I wanted it to have, or St. Bridget to have like a physical being form, because I was like, even though I know that billionaires would not think, second guess or whatever, it's like that calming factor, right? And so the entire team, including Sarah and Boom, was like, oh, absolutely. Because I was like thinking of like Cortana.
Yeah.
In Halo, right? And so Cortana was actually a pretty big inspiration for that. So
yeah, the very first scene we meet Elise, the physical form, physical-ish form of St. Bridget's there, right? In the yellow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know. The funny thing is, I think I've made too many references to this movie recently, not on this podcast, just in general. You ever see The Mitchells versus the Machines?
No.
It's great. It's an animated movie that's on Netflix. It's very charming. There's
okay.
It's basically about like robots taking over the world and trying to send humanity into space to get rid of them. And there's a basically a Siri equivalent in it in the movie. Instead of just making it like a faceless, voice, they actually give like a face to the phone. And it's really important because it's like it personifies it and really gives it that like life to it that makes you feel more for something that has like a corporeal form rather than something that's just like bodiless. And like I think that's a really good choice. But I did want to close talking about this book. I am interested in, like, it seems like you're doing some new things and kind of pushing yourself in some like new directions with Know Your Station. How do you feel like you've grown as an artist between True Cold and Know Your Station? Like, do you feel like you can see a difference there, or is it kind of imperceptible? It's more like it just feels like you're getting better type of thing.
I think if I had to pinpoint maybe how I've grown as a creator, I would say I'm trying to be more conscious about finding ways to execute more lifelike, like anatomy and things like that. And it's interesting because I have to almost draw things more detailed because of the silhouettes and like the clothes and things that I'm wearing in Know Your Station versus True Cult, which was like Burger Lord uniforms, right? Very easy to like block the stuff out. But I think that I'm a lot more detailed with my work, and that I am able to push myself. But it's interesting because I am trying to find more ways to spend more time with more detailed pages and put more effort into every book I do. I want it to be my best, but obviously it's your best at the time and you always grow as a creator. And I've been trying to take a lot of risks with this book because I feel like I'm finally coming to a head in using like the my strengths in each book that I have found and try to like apply it to this one. And I think that I'm doing really well, like facial expressions and acting, but also like, obviously I had to kick up my anatomy game with these very gruesome murders and also find unique ways to draw them that is an approachable way and less of a messy, like to fit my style, but also execute in a way that makes sense with my style, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I would say like, I think I've become a better artist as it is, but it's also background work. I'm trying to do more background.
Sure. Yeah. Well, especially in a book like this, where it's like the environment is part of what makes it. It's like when you go into like I liked one of the early, I don't remember what scene it was, but one of the early scenes, it's like you can see like greenery, like you can see plants and stuff in there. And like, that's the type of thing that like you need in like a biome. So it's like, it's the type of stuff that's logical in there, but by showing it, you kind of like feel it a little bit more. Also, I really enjoy the fact that you just described basically approachable, gruesome murders. That is very fascinating turn of phrase. I've never really thought of gruesome murders as being approachable, but we're there now.
Yeah. Because I was like a 13 or 14-year-old picking up books that were about detectives solving murders and stuff like that, I would like an age-appropriate person picking up the book and being like, this isn't as scary or disgusting and isn't going to like throw them into a depth of nightmares, but also get across that it was like, that was disgusting and crazy. And like, as somebody who likes horror movies and likes, reading horror and things like that, I'm like, I want it to be digestible.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Well, to close, I have a bigger topic I want to bring up. I told you beforehand, I was curious as to your perspective on kind of where things are right now, because it is undeniably a weird time to be a comic creator. It's just undeniably a weird time for comics in general, but there's a lot of strange stuff going on with payments and publishers, and it just generally feels like everything is maybe a little more fluid and uncertain, at least to me as an outsider. How does that feel from the inside? Like, am I overstating things that it seems kind of weird, or is it, is it just weird?
No, I mean, I think you're totally right. And I only feel like I get a scope of it because I have friends who work in television and things like that, where You hear about all these layoffs going on at Warner Brothers or things like that, and you know that that will somehow affect DC. Like we saw the round of layoffs and stuff. And I don't work for DC, so I actually don't exactly know anything. But when you see things like that happen, you know that there are these parent core companies that have these publishers under them that could also be happening with them. Or you see announcements of like certain publishers getting investors to lay down more money and things like that. And you don't really see the effects of any of these types of things until months later, it seems like.
Yeah.
Or until you hear trickling, or like, some of these publishers going bankrupt and a lot of wonderful folks not getting paid for very hard work that they've done for months on end. Like, and having had experienced that before, it's interesting because you don't really quite know where each of these publishers are at. And it's weird when you start going down the list of things that like cost money, right? Where it be staff overhead, how many of these publishers have like a location, and how many, not everybody works from home. And then also, paper and when these books go into production and marketing and yada, yada. And like realizing how much really goes into it, where it's kind of like you don't all of a sudden, all of this money is just like bled dry, and you're praying that it has went to the creators and that they, produce this book. And I know that sometimes it's like when publishers are also waiting for money to come in to pay creators or whatever, our industry is like so bizarre, because you would think and hope that it would make such a large amount of money, but all of that money goes to like Hollywood and stuff, despite us making these very intricate IPs and stories that, some creators are very lucky to get like a second payoff later on, whether their book get picked up or anything like that. But I agree. I think we're in a weird time. We saw all the direct distribution landscape change with, I think, is it DC that has their own?
Yeah, DC is working with Lunar, and Marvel and IDW, and Dark Horse went over to Penguin Random House.
Yeah.
And now there's like a new one, Universal, that DC is working with. So, yeah, there's definitely a lot of weird stuff going on there. But, I mentioned earlier, like the idea of having to have like 1 foot today and 1 foot in tomorrow, like in how you're thinking about things. Do you feel like you have to be like conscientious of this stuff as you go through the consideration process for what's next for you? Like, do you find yourself changing how you consider projects because of all this?
Absolutely. And it also makes me think about what my expenses are and how I can say yes to events and conventions, and what for fun projects I can take versus what for work for hire projects I can take, because of when will I get paid for that? What sort of deal do I have with this book and signing with X publisher? Would it be more financially fiscal if I just did it by myself and like released it where we could get all the money up front and not have to pay somebody? Would it be rolling over into the next tax year to where it's going to mess up my expense? Like just a million things to consider. And, I will have to say, for creators that do things by themselves, like, please get a lawyer for these like deals that you're doing, because you don't quite know if it's gonna, if you could create the next big thing and not have any money tied to it because of a bad deal or something that, and publishers are making, because they also need to make money too.
Right.
Because they need to make money to spend the money on new books or creators and stuff. It's just a very complicated, very convoluted and messy. There's no like right or wrong way, and there's no direct path into comics. And I think the same goes for producing the comics. It is all very complicated, and the more I learn every year, the more I meet certain staff at publishers and I understand what they do, the more my brain is open to, wow, like just there are so many publishers, and it's sad to see them, either close down, like Piao is gonna close, right? And so it's just interesting because they've like put out such amazing books, and like you would think that they would be able to stay open, but it's so complicated to run a publisher.
It is really interesting to see all this kind of play out, and interesting, and also it's tough. I mean, it's tough for the people who work there. It's tough for the people who work with them. A lot of times, these publishers, some of the publishers, not all of them, some of them are kind of making IP plays. They're trying to, profit off of this in a very specific way. That doesn't mean there aren't people there that don't believe in comics, but that's why it's also important, though, because not everyone always has your best interest in factoring into the arithmetic of these deals and everything like that, which is why I think that your lawyer advice is really good. I mean, it's tough because it's like, that's expensive. Like that is a cost, but at the same time, the cost could be even greater on the other side, I imagine.
Yeah. Well, and then if you think about, and I know we've been talking about like only direct market, but there's like digital comic platforms too that just like have such large amounts of money to invest in these things, and that are making big deals, like Heartstopper, like became a Netflix TV show, or like things like that. Like these publishers do have to, much like, comics aren't created just for comics' sake, it feels like, anymore. Like each publisher seems to have like their one thing that they do specifically, whether it be like IP or like merch or selling TV shows or collaborating with like like musicians and things like that, or and like being able to make up money for like doing merchandising sales and things like that. Like everything's totally different across the board. And as a creator, as somebody who doesn't every the whole comics will break your heart thing, right? Like it's not, you have to be tenacious to like I make it in this industry and continue working, and like you have to make smart business decisions to grow. And I think that is hard when you don't have somebody looking out for you. And I wouldn't have had such smart decisions made if I didn't have friends who were smart to say, hey, this might not be something that you want in your contract, or like this deal doesn't seem like it's a good idea, or I maybe wouldn't work with that person. And that's hard because not every single creator has that, which is really sad. But I think it's important to learn from mistakes, or like learn from certain projects that you make, and like apply that towards all your, there's like a docket of things that you look over when you are making a decision on each project that you make.
I like it how you sounded, or earlier you made it sound like you're kind of like chaotic in your approach to all this stuff. You sound very, very like thought out to me. You sound very thought out.
My brain has 8,000 thoughts going all at once. So maybe that's why. Okay. Well, we have to close with a patron question. This is actually the hardest question I've ever had from a patron. I apologize in advance. And I want to emphasize that this is not me asking this, so I apologize in advance again. Okay. Vita Ayala asks, why are you so cute? Do you have an answer? I am only cute because I surround myself by the other cute people that I adore and love, which is Vita Ayala.
There we go. Oh, if only we had the video.
The tables are turned.
You did a little chin thing where it's like, I don't even know how to describe that. That's a thing. Does that have a name?
I don't know. It's when you put your two hands underneath your chin and like bat your eyelashes a little bit to be like, I'm cute.
There we go. All right. Well, we finally have an answer to that question. Vita, I hope you're satisfied. Liana, I hope you enjoyed the experience. Thank you so much for joining me on this podcast to discuss True Cult, Know Your Station, and everything you've been up to for the past couple of years, because it's been a lot.
It has been a lot. And we didn't even get to hit on the Barbie movie.
Oh my God. Next time it will just be all Barbie all the time. We're doing a special podcast for Patreon and Zest World where we're just going to post our review of Barbie together. It will truly be a Barbie world.
I appreciate you so much, David. Seriously. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with artist Liana Kangas. You can find them on social media wherever it still exists on the social media sphere when this podcast hits at Liana Kangas and in Know Your Station at Boom. Love Off Panel, want to support it? Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts today and give the show a rating or review while you're at it, but 5 stars only. You can also support the show by backing it on Patreon. Find the show at patreon.com/offpanel, and when you back it on there, you get early access to each week's podcast, as well as weekly content and more. Want even more? Subscribe to my subscription comic site Sketched at sketch.com for long-form articles, interviews, and the rest of the site's content. You can find Off Panel and Sketched on social media by following on Twitter and Instagram at @sketchcomic or following me at @slicefriedgold. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, including Kelly Sudaconic, Max Wood, Jeremy Lambert, Brian, Matteo Ciccati, Chris Doré, Nir Levy, Dennis Hoffman, Jason Hussa, Cancel Comics, Kieran Gillen, Jonathan Kent Uratam, Henry Johnson, Django Boren, James Tynan IV, Chris Langford, Jason Wood, Tom Peachy, Ben Damset, Rom V, Devin Fitzsimons, Nick Walker, Patrick Coyle, Isaac Warren, Scott Carpenter, Rent Narb Studios Comics, Nicholas Palmieri, Capes and Tides Podcast, Klaus Vandeven, Brian, Submed Industries, Raj Patel, Jack Mulqueen, Kyle, Carl Kerschel, Robert Masella, Elza Chartier, Luke Nakashoji, Dr. Luke, Scott Hazelwood, Michael Tunk, Canadian by Proxy, Johnny Cannon, Bradley Rader, Carl Troy, Brandon DePillis, Patrick Brower, Declan Shalvey, Dan Guarino, Josh Williamson, Adam Freeman, Ben Wild, Brian Klein Q, SB, Nick Bennett, Daniel Whitfield, Susanna Pola, Reed Hinkley Barnes, Mario Tiambang, AbductedTheComic.com, Andrew Carita, Matt Mahoney, Stephen Hall, Pensacola Pop Comics, Kim Heslin, Philip Myra, Christian Sheldon, Kenny Porter, Chris Pachalo, Torin Grunbeck, Fuzz Bubbles, Christopher Todd, Transmitter Down, Waltz Comics and Books, Danny Owley, Paul Salates, Akil Wilson, Alex Dimitriopoulos, Terry Dodson, Wesley Giff, Sean Kirkham, Alistair Ross, Julio Anta, Brett A. Schmidt, Jason Goodmanson, Paul Ryanwan, Vita Ayala, Dave Slusher, Akil, Kokachi, Sean Pinello, Ken Heidelman, Philip Seavey, Al Ewing, David Kelly, Robert Wilson IV, Nick Polito, Brendan Fletcher, Jonathan Nilsson, Jason Assey, Adam Bogert, Matthew Taylor, Nick Patera, Jacob Sorelli, Ford Gilmore, David Baraldi, Nick Hall, Bjorn Basin, John Hendrick, Steve Anderson, Ian Maxfield, Cliff Chang, Colin McMahon, Chris Palmer, Scott McGovern, Nathan Fairbairn, Kat McKenzie, Adam Highfill, Fiona Staples, Mark Abbott, Mike Murphy, Michael Shirley, Tom Barnett, Jim Demonacos, Norbert, Nick Lowe, James Kaplan, and Mission Comics and Art in San Francisco. You guys are all the best. A quick thanks to Upright T-Rex Music, who wrote and performed Off Panel's theme song just for the show. Check out their music on Spotify because it's completely delightful. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode.